Hiya, and welcome back to One Last Night. The game that teaches us that, shit. It's been so long since it's been so long since I've last played this. I don't know what to say. I don't... Ugh. Fuck. Let me turn up the sensitivity of the mic. There we go. Yeah. The game that teaches us that, I genuinely cannot think of anything. So let's just hop right in. Bandits. Arc 2. Captured. It was nice to have a cloudless sky like the one tonight, giving a view of the stars that littered the void above the world. Without the light pollution of the city from before, things were clear enough that you no longer needed to travel far outside of town just to get a glimpse of it. The stars shone alongside the moon, illuminating the ruined cityscape that rested on the earth below. It was almost like resting in a blanket fort with a knitted one draped across as the ceiling. Oh my god, I cannot... Turn that down, and then turn that up slightly. Okay. At least, that was the comparison the young boy made as he stared up into it. He missed the days where he could make one at home. Yes. It is a must-have. He was only 8 when it all happened, the world coming to an end. He wasn't even fully sure what had happened, just that things were different than before. Hiya. No more accompanying his parents to the store, getting to sit in the cart and see all the items lining the shelves. No more going to school to see his friends and learning an abundance of new and exciting things. He was just used to getting them. He was just getting used to multiplication too. There's like 3 whole parts before this. No more of any what he'd grown used to in those few years he'd spent alive. Eli, sweetheart, don't stray too far from the camp, okay? You know how dangerous it gets out there at night. Well, aside from his parents. I won't, Mom. Promise. Eli hoped the words were enough to reassure her as he sat cross-legged near the edge of the camp, the heat of the fire at his back. He used a finger and traced the imaginary lines connecting the stars, thinking about the constellations his parents had taught him. He smiled at how good he was at finding them, spending each night scouring the sky for their distant whereabouts. Oh? Yeah, that's not smart parenting. The smile only widened as he placed his favorite by far. Luciferous! Though he had the story memorized by heart, he always asked his father to tell it to him before bed each night. He could even recall the tale in his voice. He's in danger. A long time ago there once lived a man named Luciferous. He came from humble beginnings, with not much to call to his name except a decrepit little house. Yet he was happy, for he had a wonderful wife and son whom he loved from the bottom of his heart. He would do anything to keep them safe. Luciferous developed a kind and caring nature. He helped those in need in his community, especially when the greedy king's soldiers came knocking. One day, a wounded man appeared at his doorstep in need of aid. Unable to turn away a man in need, he brought him in and tended his injuries. The man was a rebel who was attempting to usurp the king and create a fair kingdom for all, one where people like he and Luciferous would no longer suffer under his rule. Unfortunately, a soldier had seen the man enter, and it wasn't long until reinforcements returned with him. Luciferous tried to tell them it was a misunderstanding, but the soldiers refused to listen to him. They burnt his house to the ground and took his wife and son away. The rebels and Luciferous were sent to the underworld, their ties to the mortal realm severed. Instead of accepting his fate, however, he pitched a deal to the gods. His fate had been unfair and out of his control, as was the case for most in life. Rather than containing him to the afterlife, he would be allowed to become a hero in his own right. Like the gods themselves, all a person in need would have to do was utter his name to receive his divine aid. It was a desperate bid, one that both he and the gods could sense was futile. What reason did they have to take worship away from themselves? The gods all laughed at Luciferous, except for one. The goddess of night extended a hand towards him and offered a new deal. He would be allowed to return to the realm of living once per century, where he would receive divine gifts in order to help people. This, however, would come at a cost. He must give up any distinguishable physical features, as such making him unidentifiable. Luciferous immediately accepted the deal and was promptly returned to the mortal plane. Meanwhile, the goddess of night engraved his image in the sky as a reminder of their accord. Ever since, there have been reports of a cloaked figure spanning ages, but not a single one could recall him having a face. So if you ever find yourself in urgent need, find Luciferous in the stars and bid him your request. If you're lucky enough, he just might answer. Wow. Eli stifled a yawn as he finished recounting the tale in his head. Combined with the journey today, he was exhausted. As he finished tracing the constellation, he was surprised to find a star that didn't belong there. He traced it again to be sure, and this time the star had moved. Focusing on the light, he realized it hadn't been a star at all. In fact, it looked a lot like a butterfly. A glowing butterfly. Eli had never heard of butterflies being able to glow before, and it seemed to be approaching him. He stuck a finger out, letting it land on his hand as he watched in awe. This had to be one of the coolest things he'd seen in ages. It was much better than those monsters he and his parents had to flee from days prior. A soft breeze blew at him and the butterfly took off, beginning to fly away. He watched it go, not wanting it to leave. Behind him, he could hear the soft arguing of his parents. They'd been doing this a lot lately. Eli glanced between the butterfly and his parents, unsure of what to do. He had always been a good boy, listening to everything they said, following their rules. He knew sometimes his parents broke their own rules too, and they always asked him not to tell anyone. They said sometimes they just had to indulge. By that logic, shouldn't he be allowed to indulge once in a while too? Oh, fuck no. Oh, hell no. Hell no. 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 With one final look back at his parents, Eli quickly slipped into the night and after the butterfly. Oh, fuck no. Nope. 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 No. Eli's parents, please. 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 Go get your kid. Yeah. It was a bit hard to see at first, and as his eyes started to adjust to the darkness while he followed the bug into the distance. He wouldn't stray too far, though, since that meant he could sneak back without them knowing he was ever gone. Wait up! The butterfly kept drifting farther and farther away as Eli tried desperately to catch up to it. He was getting a little uncomfortable with just how far he was from the camp. Eli stared ahead, though. A soft light seemed to be coming from over a hill of rubble. He wondered what it could be as the butterfly coasted over it, calling to his curiosity. As he reached the crest, the boy's awe only grew at the sight before him. An entire swarm of glowing butterflies were dancing in the air together. He marveled at the sight, drawn in by the lure of something new and beautiful. It demanded all of his attention. Eli stood mesmerized as the insects swirled together in a maelstrom of light. Go back to bed! Go to bed, child. You're young. Go to bed. Go to bed. Stay away from the butterflies. They're going to lift you up and carry you to not living. Go to bed. It was because of this that Eli failed to notice the man in the center of it all, at first. Insects fluttered around the rabbit, obscuring a proper view of him. I tried. After a moment, the boy caught sight of him. Two tan ears protruded above the head, while his bare torso showcased the white fur decorated with small brown spots. Eli stood there, confused by all of this. Where was the man's shirt? Was he okay? Why did the butterflies like him so much? Maybe if he asked, the strange man would answer. He hesitated, though, remembering the message of being careful around strangers. Except, wasn't he indulging himself tonight? Surely a question wouldn't hurt. Famous last thoughts. Excuse me, sir, who... Eli! Eli flinched at the sound of his father calling his name from behind him. He was walking up the pile of rubble where the butch stood with anger in his eyes. He knew he was in trouble now. I thought we had made it clear. No wandering off alone. I'm sorry, Dad, but No buts! I thought you knew better. I do, Dad, I promise. I just wanted to indulge like you and Mom do. Eli could see the heat rush to his father's cheeks. Whether it was embarrassment or anger, he wasn't sure. Eli took the opportunity to cut in before his dad could say anything else. I'm done. I'm dead. I'm dead. Okay, what are some PG alternatives to it? Hang on. I gotta find out. PG alternatives to the word. Yeah. Hilarious synonyms. Okay. I just looked up hilarious synonyms. Yeah. Shaking of the sheet. Hang on. It isn't a proper stream without getting sidetracked. And we're getting sidetracked. Shaking of the sheets. Shoot twixt wind and water. Have your corn ground. Okay. Oh no. No. Oh no. Oh no, that is enough. That is enough. That is enough. Back to the... Yeah. I just wanted to see the butterflies. He gestured to his left with a sadness in his voice, which only confused his father. Butterflies? The two turned in unison where the swarm of insects resided, glowing as brightly as the stars above. Only now the pair had a clear view of the man standing with them. Only it wasn't a man at all. From the upper jaw to the base of his bones, to the base of his ears, all flesh and fur had been sloughed off, leaving a darker, hardened skull behind. Blood was splattered across its body, dripping from the eye sockets and the base of its two elongated tusks. Most eerily, however, was the hole in its throat, the source of the glowing butterflies. The insects poured out in a shiny blue swarm, beginning to surround the figure once more. Eli knew this had to be another of those monsters, another fated. Run. Eli shook himself from the daze, looking up to his father in fear. Run now! Back to your mother! But he was frozen, not wanting to leave his dad behind. Go! That was the final push he needed, hearing the terror and concern in his father's voice replacing the earlier anger sending him sprinting away. Oh no. Eli focused as best he could on his footsteps, desperately trying to get back to the camp. His mom could help them. She always knew what to do. He stumbled as he ran when he heard a scream of agony from behind, turning to see the swarm overtaking where his father stood. He quickly set his sights back ahead, pushing out the brief imagery of what looked like his father being eaten alive. Butterflies didn't eat meat, did they? Damn! Eli tripped when he reached the camp and strayed into his mother's arms, beginning to bawl his eyes out at the embrace. Eli, baby, what's going on? What happened? Where's your father? Without looking, the boy pointed behind him towards where he'd last seen them. Help him! The butterflies! I'm sorry! Looking where her son had pointed, she saw the swarm of butterflies at the crest of the hill with a figure standing amongst them. In its paws was a limp, lifeless corpse. Eli's mom quickly knelt down, bringing herself to eye level with her son. It's okay, sweetheart. You're forgiven. Now, Mommy needs you to do her a favor, okay? The boy nodded as the swarm glanced in their direction. I need you to grab your bag and run. But it'll be okay, I promise. Mommy and Daddy love you very dearly, and we'll see you soon, alright? Eli nodded and gave his mother one last hug. I love you too. The glowing butterflies began their advance once more. Now go, and whatever you do, don't look back. The boy ran past his mother, grabbing his small bag as he made a break for it. He had to listen this time, then things would be alright. Wouldn't they? Eli ran as fast as his short legs could carry him, off into the never-ending night. He stumbled frequently, tears clouding his vision at what had just happened. If only he'd listened. If only he'd never broken the rules. If only there was more he could do to help. All he could do now was run. He didn't stop when he heard the shrill scream echo from behind, wanting to look back but knowing it was better if he listened. Instead, he kept moving forward as best he could, but he knew the creature was beginning to close in on him. Eli ran into an open area, what looked like the remains of a roundabout. He had to keep moving. Suddenly, the boy tripped, his foot failing to clear a piece of jutting cement, sending him sprawling forward onto the hard ground. His pack shot out of his hands as the pebbles scraped at his exposed limbs. Eli let out a cry of pain as he began to sob more furiously. He sat up, gaze focused on the way he came. The butterflies were closing in, the writhing mass of flying insects preparing to do to him what they did to his parents. Slowly stalking behind him was the rabbit, more glowing vermin pouring from the hole in his throat. Was this his end? Wasn't he too young to be brought to the underworld? An idea struck him. He turned his gaze upwards to the open skies. He searched for the constellation of his hero. With the last bit of courage he could muster, he whispered the words he used to so many times in the past, but finally for a reason more serious than a petty want. Please, Luciferous, help me. But there was no answer. I am, tearing up right now. The butterflies began to close in on their prey, moving swiftly as their wings cut through the night. Still, he had to try once more, louder this time. Luciferous! Help me! The swarm took to the skies above him, blocking out his view of the stars. This was it. His last bid failed. Eli could do nothing but stare up in horror, the tears refusing to even fall. Get down! The voice echoed in his head, and Eli curled in on himself on command. He had to trust his mother. As he prepared to feel the battering of insects against his skin, he instead felt a surge of heat from overhead as an orange light flashed at his closed eyes. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled the air as Eli felt a few of their bodies hit him on their way down. When the heat stopped, Eli gingerly sat up and opened his eyes. What happened? What was going on? The dead bodies of the swarm littered the ground around him. Hey there, you alright? The boy looked towards the voice, shocked at seeing the source originated from that of a cloaked figure. Ooh? Luciferous had answered his call. The man looked down at Eli, stopping as his mind processed what he was seeing. Shit, you're just a child. Shoot. I probably shouldn't swear in front of you, right? The boy shook his head as the two stared at each other, both surprised to see the other for different reasons, until a guttural shriek brought them back to the present. They simultaneously turned to look at the rabbit, his eye sockets beginning to glow a similar shade to that of its companions. A cascade of insects began to pour from its throat, flying hastily toward the pair. Right, gotta focus. Be back in a second, kid. With a knife in one hand and seemingly nothing in the other, Eli watched as a cloaked figure dashed towards the enemy without wasting another second. But what was he planning to do with just a knife? Was Luciferous really that skilled? Just before the two sides collided, a bright flash of orange cut through the night air. Eli recognized it as the same he'd seen through closed eyes just moments before. Flames cascaded through the air from the empty hand of the man, scorching the butterflies out of the air and out of his way, their blue glow reduced to twinkling red embers. Eli couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't recall any mention of the hero having the ability to summon flames. A glint of metal on Luciferous's back drew his gaze to the canister attached there, likely the source of what was fueling the fire. While the insect corpses dropped to the ground or turned to ash from the spray, the cloaked figure was gaining ground towards the swarm. That cry from earlier resounded again, more primal and ear-piercing. It could tell it was losing, and it wasn't happy. Let me, turn that down a bit. Another cloud of butterflies poured from the hole in its throat, though this time the creatures were much smaller than before. Although it was hard to tell from this distance, Eli could have sworn that pieces of its own flesh seemed to be turning into those same butterflies, as the bones beneath grew more pronounced, accompanying the holes in the skin that hadn't been there moments earlier. The new batch swarmed Luciferous, beginning to fall victim to the same fate as their predecessors. However, they began to learn from their mistakes, a portion of them flying out of the way and diving towards the opposite exposed side. They never made contact, though, as the blade danced through the air and sliced through their minuscule forms. With fire in one hand and a dagger in the other, the butterflies had only succeeded in slowing his progress for a moment as they fell, their burned bodies cluttering the ground below. The swarm was dissipating fast, and the rabbit was looking angrier than ever. Its body panted as it was gearing up for another shriek. One that never came. All that Eli could see was a brief reflection of light through the air before a gurgle came from the rabbit. Something was protruding from its throat now, an object that his eyes tracked back to the now empty hand of Luciferous. The butterfly seemed to stop in the air as well, the connected minds of the beings all processing what had just happened. That short moment of hesitation was all that the hero needed to close the remaining distance and set the main body alight. The sound was horrible, a high-pitched gurgle of pain as it flailed in the flames, trying desperately to escape. Were it not for the knife lodged in its neck, Eli was sure the shrieks would have been even more haunting in the night air. The few remaining butterflies descended clumsily on Luciferous, attempting to stop the stream of flame, their blue glow dimming as the movement of the rabbit slowed. Silently, the cloaked figure stood over the burning body. As the now dull insects dropped from the air, Eli watched as the mouth muttered something silently. After a moment, he turned, walking back towards the boy with a sense of purpose in his step. Sorry you had to, witness all that. Even now that kind of thing still messes with me. The man let out a quiet damn it under his breath, but Eli still heard it. Are you okay? You're not injured anywhere, are you? Luciferous reached out a hand towards him to check, but the boy flinched away. Eli wanted to trust the butterfly man, and that had only ended badly. Even if this stranger was really Luciferous, could he be trusted? The fight just now was impressive, but that only served to prove how he was dangerous. There really was something to stranger danger, after all. Hey now, it's alright. I'm not going to hurt you, kid. His hand still extended, the cloaked figure crouched down so that he was at eye level with the boy. I just want to help. Eli's hand began to reach towards Luciferous's and paused, still unsure if this was the right course of action. Trust him. Eli's head spun around, trying to find the source of his mother's voice. Where was she? That was her, he knew it. Trust him. There it was, her voice again. This time when she said it, though, he realized it came from the same place as earlier. In his head. This wasn't like his thoughts, though. He knew the difference between those and this. This was like someone else was speaking inside his brain. Trust him. Eli still wasn't sure what to do, but he knew he could trust his mother. She had only ever done things for him, and if he listened to her, they'd definitely see each other again soon. So the boy turned his attention back to the man, only to find him scanning the area rapidly. What was it, kid? What did you hear? The man brought his gaze back towards Eli, a concerned and questioning look in his eye. It took a moment for him to find his voice. I trust you. Luciferous paused at that before letting out a laugh. It was hearty and deep, something that made the boy feel safe. I should hope so. I just saved your life. He brought his hand down and ruffled the boy's head fur. I'm glad to hear it, bud. Now, why don't you tell me your name? I can't just keep calling you nicknames after all. Eli shifted into a cross-legged position, getting himself more comfortable. I'm Eli. Pleasure to meet you. The man relaxed at that, his stance taking on a welcoming and open demeanor. Eli, huh? A strong name for a strong boy. Very polite, too. Your parents taught you well. Bro, what the fuck? At the mention of them, Eli's expression soured as tears sprang to his eyes. He still didn't know what happened to them. Were they okay? Were they safe? He knew neither of these were likely the answer, but he had to believe they might be. He had to stay strong for them. Meanwhile, Luciferous cringed at the realization of the impact of his words. Shit, I'm sorry, kid. I didn't mean to upset you. His voice changed to a whisper as he muttered under his breath again. Man, I wish I was better with the kids right now. He paused, trying to think of something to say that could help. Oh, I never introduced myself. I know. Eli interrupted him between sniffles. You're Luciferous, right? There was confusion in his voice as the man responded. Luciferous? Oh, they hear from those old stories. Sorry, kid, but... He looked towards the boy, seeing the desperation in his eyes. You guessed it, that's me alright. Glad to know I still have fans nowadays. Eli noticeably cheered up at that, causing the man to relax. Now, how can I help you, Eli? There was silence as the boy pondered what the next step was. Should they go back and look for his parents, or was it better to wait here? They'd told him when he was younger that if he ever got lost, the best thing to do was stay put, though right now he wanted to be somewhere that didn't smell this badly. Lucifer stepped in, seeing the boy's hesitation. I'll tell you what, kid, I'm getting a bit tired and could definitely use some good rest. How about I bring you back to my camp? We can stay there for the night, and you can have some time to sleep and think. How does that sound? Eli smiled softly and nodded, brushing the dirt off himself as he stood up and reached for Luciferous' hand to hold as they walked. Instead, the man hoisted the boy onto his back so he wouldn't have to walk. Resting there, the boy felt safer than he had in a while and began to drift off. Under the hood, the man smiled gently to himself. Sweet dreams, Eli. Oh, that's precious. With that, the two set off into the ruined city, accompanied only by the stars shining from the cloudless sky above. Dear Marshall, why does it still hurt even after all this time? It's been over a year since I saw him last. I thought I would have been fine by now. He ruined so much for me, and I've worked so hard to heal those scars, to move on. Yet, whenever I hear his name or think of his face, I'm filled with unbridled anger. The way things left off between us was so unsatisfactory, so emotionally raw, that it still hurts to remember. He betrayed me without a second thought, like he never even fucking cared about me. I wish he would have talked to me, given us a chance to talk things out. Instead, I was met with a wall. He seemed so uninterested, so emotionally dead. It was like he'd stopped caring about our relationship long ago. After that argument, I just packed my shit and left without another word. Don't get me wrong, I'm more than happy that I've found you. You've been nothing but a light in my life. There's nobody in this world I love more than you, Marshall. But a wound left untreated is bound to fester. He left me with so many regrets and doubts that I'm not sure I'll ever get answers to. I never want to see him again, and I want to sit down and talk things out at the same time. It's so confusing and clear all at once. It's frustrating that I just can't be happy with my present and my future. The past just knows how to dig its claws in and never let go. One day I hope I can sort things out with him. Just knowing the answers to these questions engraved in my brain should be enough to stave off the hurt. For now, I'll take it one day at a time. Recovery is a process after all. At least I have you to help me through it, my love. I know you'll always be there to support me. The first step I should take, though, is saying his name. I've avoided it this whole entry to try and keep some semblance of control over my emotions. It's baby steps, but anything is progress at this point. Better to confront my demons now rather than have them berate me later. I sign off now. I got some stress baking to do. I think some croissants should do nicely. See you soon, my beloved. Love, Dorian. P.S. Dear Alistair, if you ever read this, go fuck yourself. Damn. It's hard to keep a proper track of time when you can't see anything. Granted, what little light that does shine through the fabric of the bag on my head helps, but it all seems to drag on forever. From the amount of times we've stopped to sleep, this is probably our third day of walking since the ambush and it was getting dark already. After the bandits had downed us with chloroform, I'd woken up a few minutes later with something over my head and a massive headache. Part of me wishes the chloroform did work how it had in the movies. Hiya! Then the fuckers would have had to carry us for hours. Instead, our hands were tied behind our backs, our pockets searched, and we were forced to walk blindly. Said binding also served as a lead so we couldn't flee. They slept in shifts, making sure to watch us at all times. Any attempts I made to free myself or for either Xavier or I to talk to each other were met with swift physical punishment. Our captors could only do so much considering we still had to be able to walk, but they made what little they could do count. For now, it was easier to eavesdrop and glean what info I could before we reached our destination. What I learned so far was that we were en route to their home base somewhere further into the city, and close to the lake. The route we were taking was the safest one, but not the fastest. They didn't want to risk encountering any faded or potential wannabe heroes. I wasn't sure for how long, but it was clear that they'd been stalking the outside of Haven, waiting to capture more prisoners like us. The new info only brought more questions to mind. Why did they want prisoners anyway? Wasn't it enough to steal from people? All of this was, of course, for their boss, whom they frustratingly hadn't said the name of. Maybe they had some kind of taboo over saying it? I'd heard of stranger things in these post-apocalyptic groups. I stumbled suddenly, startling myself out of my thoughts as I barely caught my balance. I had barely anything to go off of right now, but that would have to be enough. I need to keep myself focused. It didn't help that each minute that passed steadily built up the anxiety in my chest. Wherever we were headed, it wasn't good. I listened intently for the next few minutes, trying to hear anything of interest being discussed. Unfortunately, the said topic was about gambling. Poker certainly wasn't going to set me free. The conversation was growing intense, the group seemingly focused on winning the argument. Maybe this was my chance to speak to Xavier. We had to get out of this. I drifted closer to the sound of the footsteps walking next to me. I spoke towards him in a hushed tone, my voice raspy after not having used it for a while and with barely any water given to me. Hey Xavier, you alright? I hear a small inhale next to me before the familiar voice whispered back. I don't really know. I'm scared and trying to process it all. You? Trying to be. Don't fret though, kid. We'll be alright. Listen for my signal. How will I know what to... His words were cut off by an impact, followed by a sudden wheeze. Haven't you two learned your lesson about shutting the fuck up? I felt a surge of anger rush through me at the sound. Hey! I was the one who started the conversation, not him. Look at you taking all the blame. What a hero you are! My words were cut off as I felt the air leave my body, the impact of a fist forcing it out violently, leaving me doubled over in pain. Stars danced in my hood as I struggled to recover from the blow. I wasn't given the comfort of catching my breath as a hard boot to my back sent me toppling forward to the ground. I curled myself into a ball, making myself smaller on instinct in an attempt to fill my lungs with oxygen again. My chest burned from the strikes. Better to focus on me than Xavier, though. Same. I could hear our captors laughing at me, delighting in my suffering. The media was right. The apocalypse does bring out the worst in some people. My arms were jerked upwards as my lead was tugged. Yes. Get up already. We're finally here. I used what little movement capabilities I had to push myself into a sitting position, just barely getting my legs under my feet to stand. We walked forward a short distance before we stopped. The female bandit's voice raised to speak to the others. Wait here a minute. I'll let them know we're here so the boss can come and see our haul. Her footsteps moved away from us, leaving Xavier and I with the remaining two bandits. This is our chance to try something. The anxiety reached its peak, stress spreading throughout my body as I let my fight or flight instincts take over. I had to act now. Grabbing the rope behind me, I tugged it forward suddenly and felt it slack as the bandit was brought closer to me. I took a big step back and flung my head backwards, hoping for the best. I felt the crunch of his nose as it impacted against my skull. Fuck! The rope dropped as he let go from the shock, an opportunity I used to kick backwards and send him onto his ass. I could do this. I could get us free. There were sounds of a scuffle next to me, Xavier having realized that was a signal. As fast as I could manage, I grabbed the rope and... My movements were halted entirely as a loud and sudden cry of pain resounded from the direction of the other bandit. While I'd never heard him yell like that before, it was unmistakably Xavier. Take another fucking step and another of your boyfriend's fingers gets broken. Understand? I stood frozen from the shock of it all, the adrenaline leaving my body as reality set in. Of course they'd use him against me. What other tactic did this scum have? Alright, no, it's time. It's time. It's time. Ready? Tatakai. Tatakai. Wait. I stood still as the remaining fight left my body, replaced with guilt as Xavier softly whimpered over his broken finger. You're done. You're done. You're done. Every single time you break one of his fingers, I'm going to break your fucking face. I'm going to hook you to a fucking car battery and overcharge it. As much as I wanted to reason with myself that this was a worthwhile attempt, it had gotten us nowhere. We were still captured by a group of bandits, and now Xavier was injured for whatever was to come. I heard the grunts of my captors standing up behind me as I readied myself for whatever harm was to come. You're going to pay for that, you Hey! For once I was thankful for her return. She seemed to be more reasonable than the other two, but her punches always hit the hardest. Don't damage the goods any further. They're the last two we need. Yeah, that's allowed. It thought that the word... A fucking automod. Automod thought that the word finger was a sexual term. Like, it's not. Fucking automod. Don't damage the goods any further. They're the last two we need. A frustrated sigh came from the second bandit as I could feel his eyes boring a hole through the bag. Don't fucking try anything. That applies to all of you. Now let's go. We don't want to keep the boss waiting. The rope behind my hands was raised as we started moving forward, an annoyed grumbling in the air mixed with the sound of our footsteps. The ground beneath our feet changed to something harder. As resonance shifted, we were led into a building as echoes of everything grew louder the deeper we went. The only way out of this was through. Whatever came next, we'd have to face it head on, one way or another. A door scraped against the floor in front of us as we were met with the sounds of whoops and cheering. I heard slivers of comments from the people around us. A bright orange light shone through the back from a distance, growing brighter with each step and adding the crackling of fire to the mix. They were all excited for our arrival, looking forward to whatever they planned to do with us. Some even muttered about taking bets. Oh, jeez. Damn. I hated being the center of attention like this. Whenever a speech had to be delivered at Haven, another member of the council would always have to handle it. Something about having to stand up in front of a group of people and speak robbed my mind of anything I had planned to say, even if it was written down for me. Social anxiety is a bitch. Nah, I think it's fine. crowd began to quiet as a set of heavy footsteps entered the room. The sound echoed purpose and pride, the person they belonged to knowing they dominated the space. Next to them was a softer pair, clearly meant to be less noticeable to the first. An advisor? A second in command? Oh, jeez. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. The room came to a hush as I presumed was the leader stopped in front of Xavier and I. We were pushed roughly to our knees before them, meant to kneel before the person who would decide our fate. My, it seems we have some valuable new merchandise on our hands. The voice seemed to fill the room, loud and coarse with slight tinges of a foreign accent. The depth of it only helped command my attention, a natural-born leader. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my God. Yeah, no. No. Damn. 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 Wow. Except I was more focused on my blood beginning to run cold, my body going still. I was all too familiar with this voice. The footsteps moved around us as he inspected our bodies. They're in good condition, too. I'm sure they'll put on quite an entertaining show. He stopped behind us. Though the injured finger on this one might prove troublesome. Cal, make a note to have him treated before tomorrow. Yes, sir. The scratching of a pen where the softer steps had paused indicated Cal was the person accompanying him. As he made his way back before us, I could hear the grin on his voice as he spoke. As you all may already know, with the addition of these two wonderful specimens, we finally have enough recruits for the next round of Wonderland. Cheers erupted from around the room, the bandits celebrating before being quieted once more. I look forward to seeing each and every one of you there, and thank you to the three who brought them here. Excellent work. As he started clapping, the other jolted in on a round of applause. He was treating this entire thing as though it were a performance, as if this was a circus where he was the ringleader and we were the freaks on display for the adoring crowd. I always knew he liked being the center of attention, but hearing him like this was sickening. Now, without further ado, what say you all we greet our guests properly? With a confirmation from the crowd, he took a step to my right where Xavier stood, and there was a brief rustle of fabric. Such a handsome face to be greeted with. I was right in believing he'd be a star. Folks, tell me, young one, how shall your fans be addressing you tomorrow? Everything was silent as they anticipated Xavier's response, but none came. Good kid, don't give them anything to work with. Well, would you look at that? We've got ourselves a shy boy with us. Maybe he'd be more willing to talk with some motivation. He circled around once more, and Xavier let out a cry of pain again. So he does speak! I'll ask you, dear friend, so this finger of yours isn't marred any further. What is your name? It's stabby stab time. There was another silence before the bat yelled out his response. Xavier! My name is Xavier. Give it up for Xavier the bat, everyone. The applause sounded once more as I readied myself for what I knew was next. Dear Xavier isn't our only guest here, however. How about we see what's behind bag number 2? The air was heavy with anticipation as the attention was drawn solely to me. I dreaded this moment for years, mentally preparing for the day it would inevitably come. I practiced what to say, what to do, how to react, everything I could think of for when we finally met again. Then there was an apocalypse, and I had more important priorities in settling things with him. I wasn't even sure I'd ever see him again, though part of me was hoping for it. Yet, here we are, in a situation I couldn't have ever predicted. As the bag slid off my head and my eyes adjusted to light, I brought my gaze up to look into the eyes that had haunted my memories for years and spoke. Hey, yo. Hello, Alistair. Ha! Everything remained silent as I waited for a response, punctuated by the shock on Alistair's face as he stared at me. It's been what, a little over 3 years since we last spoke? I knew I should be taking stock of my surroundings, trying to learn everything I could about where I was and what was happening. Instead, all my brain could focus on was the anger starting to burn in my chest at seeing him again. The rage that had spent so many years simmering just beneath the surface started to boil over. My eyes not wanting to leave his face, I watched as the shock was replaced with a smug laugh as he pieced together his composure. Holy shit! Dorian, is that really you? I couldn't help but sigh, his face transforming into the smirk I'd grown to hate. Unfortunately for the both of us, it is. I admit it, you got me good there. I really thought you'd have died by now. You're basically a glorified house husband, last I heard. What was his name? Michael? Well, times and people change if you haven't noticed. For example, I wasn't expecting to meet you again after being kidnapped by your cronies. All's fair in love and war, though. You taught me that. I rolled my eyes at the line. You always did love trying to use my words against me. I have to say, though, the leader of a bunch of assholes does suit you properly. You even dressed for the occasion. I gestured my hand at the length in front of him, from the piercing on his lower maw to the corset on his tight black pants. And you always did look better when you were on your knees for me. And look, your hair is already tied back. An involuntary grunt of disgust escaped my lips. How have you been, though? I thought you and that wolf were doing quite well. Did he leave you already, or did he die to get away from you? Either way, I see you move on fast. He gestured vaguely to the bat next to me, the seething in my chest reaching an apex as I struggled to contain it. He's out there. I just need to find him. Aw, still as delusional as ever, I see. Your devotedness would almost be inspiring if it wasn't so sad. Then how about you? Still as alone as ever, trying to make yourself seem important? I see that's why you've surrounded yourself by a bunch of nobodies. If not you, they'd easily find some other shit show to worship. In case you forgot, you're replaceable. I could see the twitch in Alistair's eyebrow at my words. Direct hit. Before he could break the facade, however, a hand set itself on his shoulder. Sir. I'd nearly forgotten about the other people in the room, whispering confusedly to each other and trying to figure out what was going on. I wanted to look at Xavier, but my eyes fixated themselves on Alistair's assistant instead. I'd only ever met one palace cat in my life, and I wasn't ever going to forget him. He looked significantly different now, though. I remember his features being perfectly symmetrical once, but now he was scared. A jagged streak ran its way down his cheek while the other was straight down his face, crossing over his now unseeing eye. I'm not gonna lie, I think that's Eli's dad. Like, I highly doubt that's Eli. What was strange, though, was that they were distinctly burn scars. It begged the question. Were they intentional? Before I could try and provoke either of them again, a cough from Xavier drew the attention of the room back to him. So, do you two know each other? Unfortunately. There was more silence as neither of us explained further. How? I let out a sigh as I spoke up before he could. Xavier, this is Alistair. My ex. His eyes went wide as his mouth opened and closed repeatedly, trying to find the words to convey anything about this situation. A smile finally crossed my face at that. He usually always had something to say, but seeing this grounded me again. I found myself grateful for his presence. Even tied helpless and kneeling on the ground, he found a way to help. Sorry about that unexpected little part of the show, everyone. Alistair's voice commanded everyone's gaze once more, the showman's inflection to it doing its well-practiced job. As you all have just witnessed, our latest contender has revealed himself to be none other than my ex-boyfriend. It must be a shock to you all to learn that somebody once had the privilege of dating me, but consider this a ray of hope. If someone as horribly plain as this man once had a shot, what's to say none of you might too? A red flushed my cheeks. Whether from embarrassment, fury, or both, I wasn't entirely sure. You and I both... I couldn't even finish my words before I was met with a quick and decisive backhand from Alistair. My cheeks stung as he lowered his voice, looking me directly in the eyes as all hints of amusement left. Quiet now. This is my show, not yours. I shivered at the cold tone, the harshness catching me off guard. Immediately, he continued past my outburst as though nothing had happened. Something else was off, though, but I couldn't put my finger on it yet. Alistair had always been a calloused, controlling asshole, but this was different. Concerning. With that being said, let's wrap the show up. Ooh, CG. He turned to the two of us, both he and Cal staring down where we knelt. The attention of the rest of the bandits focused on us with nary a whisper. Okay, I'm hearing you out. Glancing disrespectfully. Okay. That's when the pieces clicked together in my brain. His eyes. When we were talking before, after the shock of my reveal, his eyes portrayed the Alistair I'd once dated, the one I'd spent nearly 2 years of my life with. I thought the whole act I'd been hearing was just that of a show, something he'd used to lead these people and keep them in line. But when our eyes met, it was like someone else was looking back. I could see traces of the person I once knew, yet it was like another person was in control of his actions. Oh my god! Okay, we're gonna, finish this update tonight, and then we're going to read Home Somewhere Else tomorrow. By instinct, I focused my attention to the only other person who had met him as if looking for some kind of confirmation. Then we're going to read it in 2 hours. From the one time I'd met him, Cal had worn a neutral expression and hadn't been very expressive. It seemed that hadn't changed. He studied my face for a moment as if he could understand what I was thinking, and gave me a nod so slight I might have imagined it. What was going on here? Alistair had been speaking the whole time, but I only tuned in again as his speech was coming to a close. As the leader of the group, I formally welcome you to your new home for what will be the foreseeable future. We are the Ignited, the flames that rose from the ashes of our tarnished world to bring our own order to the chaos. We are what this world needs to bring forth a better future. You are both lucky and privileged to be able to join us here today. Hopefully one day you may see our ways and join us, to bear the mark of the enlightened like the rest. The sounds of fabric shuffling around us as each individual member bore a burn scar, showcasing their membership. This was more than just some banditry. These people were fucking insane. It was nearing cult territory, and that thought alone was terrifying. More so by the fact that we were their prisoners. May the fates deal your hand wisely. Bro. With those final words, cheers of excitement erupted around the room. Alistair turned his attention to the guards that had brought us in. See them to their new cells, preferably on different floors. Take the bat to our medic first to treat his finger. Without another word, he turned away and began walking away. Alistair! We aren't through here! My voice left my throat before I could even process the words I was saying. You'll regret treating me like shit again. I refuse to lose to a villain like you. Alistair paused at the exit doors, turning back for a moment with that same smirk. Oh, Dorian, always so dramatic. Whoever said you were a hero? And then he was gone, a turn of fabric, and the line stalked away. Cal followed behind him obediently, not looking back. My lead was tugged as the bandits forced me to my feet again, following the instructions their leader had left. Quickly, I looked for Xavier, trying to find him amongst the chaos. When I finally did, a scared look was plastered on his face. I tried to will myself to say something motivational, to find the words to tell him everything was going to be alright. The shock of the past few moments had left my mind blank, the rage seeping out of it and taking any comfort I could give to the young bat with it. In the next instant, we were dragged in opposite directions, losing sight of the other in the crowd. I wasn't sure when we'd see each other next, but my best guess was at whatever was happening tomorrow. Yes. I felt the anxiety building again, the fear of the situation kicking in. What I felt was guilt at not saying anything to Xavier. But if I didn't have hope for the future myself, what was the point of lying to him? I didn't really know what to expect when they said they were going to put us in cells, but it certainly wasn't including a family photo album. I flipped through the pages, watching the lives of these strangers as they first met, got married, and had 3 kids together. Where they were now was anybody's guess, but hopefully they weren't locked in an abandoned storage unit. When the bandits had led me through the halls, they thankfully hadn't placed that old bag over my head. I'd gotten a good glimpse at my surroundings. It looked like we were residing in one of those self-storage facilities, each room serving as a bedroom, a cell, or their intended purpose as storage. It was impossible to know what kinds of things had gathered here over the years, but there were enough I saw on my walk to distract myself a bit. The cell they had thrown me in had box after box of pictures from various families illuminated by the small lantern they had given me to see. It was one of the 3 useful things I'd given, the other being a lidded bucket for personal reasons, and a decently sized blanket. Personal business, Home sweet home. I picked up another album and began flipping through it. A pang of sadness grew in my chest knowing that I no longer had any photos of my loved ones. Tears began to well up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I tried to blink them back, but it was too late now as they spilled over and wet my face. I'd nearly died twice this week after 2 separate fated encounters, one of which had stupidly left my spear behind, and now I'd been kidnapped by my ex. That same ex who clearly had plans for me that I didn't know about and was also running a bandit cult. I had no clue why Haven had tried to contact me. I didn't even know if Xavier was safe. I ended up getting his fucking finger broken in the process of everything. In all my efforts to try and be some kind of hero, I'd only been a hindrance. I owed a lot to the Bat for sticking with and helping me through the week. As much as I pretended to be some kind of mentor, I knew I was nowhere near qualified enough. I was a fucking freelancer. What made me think I was qualified for any of this? Everything that had gone wrong recently was because of me and my carelessness. Now it was up to me to set things right. I wiped the last of my tears with my shirt, surprised to hear a crinkling of paper from my shirt pocket. I dug my fingers in and pulled out a small folded paper. Unfolding it, I found the Morse code guide from Xavier staring back at me. I guess the bandits had either missed it or determined one piece of paper wasn't much of a threat. For now, I tucked it back in while I set to organizing my current living space. Might as well make it look nice to help clear my head. Thankfully, they'd given me a unit with not much in it. There were a few cardboard boxes scattered about the room, accompanied by a wooden shelf with various old newspapers stacked on it. Oh, hiya! Opening the remainder of the boxes revealed more photo albums, all from various families and lifetimes. Clearly the bandits had stuck whatever they didn't deem useful in the cells. I doubted there was a way I could fashion any sort of weapon with a picture. The sound of breaking the shelf would be too loud as well. Besides, a plank that big would cause more splinters than stealthy knockouts. I placed the bucket in the furthest corner and the boxes of photos in the adjacent one. I placed my blanket over a few kids' play mats to make a shoddy bed for myself. It wouldn't be comfortable, but it was better than sleeping on the cold, hard floor. The shelf sat next to a pipe that ran through the ceiling and floor. I hoped that it wouldn't start dripping to drive me further into insanity. Finally, I grabbed a stack of newspapers to use as a makeshift pillow. With that, my new room was organized. Even rearranging the few things that I had to work with that had cleared my head a bit, which meant it was time to do the same with my thoughts. This wasn't the first time things had gone to shit for me, and I doubted it'd be the last. There were plenty of unanswered questions rattling through my head. So, let's organize. The best thing I could do was to break the thoughts down into categories and go over them individually. Which one first? Problem. Oh, I think I know exactly who that is. My ex-boyfriend runs a cult. My ex-boyfriend runs a cult is something few people get to say in their lifetimes, and somehow I ended up being one of them. I felt that familiar anger that accompanied thinking about Alistair began to surface once more, threatening to overwhelm me. It was like a tsunami, destructive and aggressive on the surface, but the true power lingering just beneath. I wasn't even sure how I was supposed to process this. It was just something I had to take at face value and move on. While it was true we hadn't seen each other in years, in the time we had gotten to know each other and even lived together, it had never seemed he would go this far. He always seemed like a genuine guy, outgoing to make people comfortable and caring to all the strangers he'd met. From what he told me when we were together, Alistair had been raised in an orphanage and took on the big brother role while he lived there. He helped the other kids sort through their problems, teach them how to read, and all that kind of stuff all the way until he moved out at 18. In hindsight, his caring nature lent a lot to his newly minted persona as a cult leader. He'd always had an almost regal nature to him, unintentionally ironic for a lion. Even after he'd moved out, he regularly sent money back there to help keep it in working condition. That was the kind of man I'd fallen in love with. That is a good question. The same man who would later betray me. When we broke up, it left me wondering how much of that side of himself he showed me was real, and how much was a facade. Now I seem to have my answer. Yet, a thought in the corner of my eye still nagged me. This wasn't like him. Alistair was an asshole, but he wasn't some villain. There had to be more going on here. He could have changed since we last spoke, and I know for a fact the apocalypse changes people. Just look at what had happened to me. I started out as someone lost looking for their boyfriend and hopelessly useless, just like most people when it first began. Then over the course of a year, I'd grown into the founder of a group quite the opposite of this one, where I helped give people safety. I'd fought monsters and won, broken through barriers of myself I didn't know were there, starting to slowly turn to the hero I'd always fantasized about being. Granted, I owed all that to Marshall. I used him as my motivator to get through this, often asking myself what he would do. In the end, it changed me a lot in unexpected ways. But Alistair? Would he have gone this far off the deep end? I had no idea what his motives were, and it scared me. What does Alistair want? I thought back to our encounter earlier, how his eyes seemed so wrong. It was like an entirely different person resided there, yet I could see traces of the person I once knew. It bothered me in a way I couldn't quite describe, just another mystery I had to uncover. Rounding out my thoughts of the encounter, they brought up whatever the event of Wonderland was multiple times. Alistair had put quite the emphasis on the entertainment value of the spectacle. That worried me. It'd been impossible to glean any specifics from their vagueness, an effort I'm sure was intentional, except that we were the final two they needed to run it. Whatever the spectacle that was running tomorrow, the prisoners they'd been gathering were the contestants, and this blatantly wasn't their first rodeo. I was sure they'd be able to get much sleep. I wasn't sure I'd be able to get much sleep tonight. Which one next? Okay. Another person here who was important, yet I knew the least about. I'd met him once before. I wasn't sure I even knew his name was Cal until today. He and Alistair had remained in touch clearly, to the point he was now an assistant running this group. I'd heard plenty of talk of palace cats, often that they were a very expressive species. They were known to be easy to read because of this. Yet Cal seemed to show anything but emotion, his face neutral for the whole exchange despite everything that was happening. He had his own story I was keen to learn, starting with how he got those scars. It was unnerving to think that maybe they'd been the entry piece of joining the group. They looked significantly like burn scars, and that would align with the name of the Ignited. I couldn't imagine he'd willingly give up one of his eyes, though. I shuddered at the thought. Was it some kind of initiation ritual? Was it forced upon him? Which brought me to that nod when we made eye contact earlier. I still wasn't entirely sure it was there, but I can't imagine why I would have made it up. He could have been with Alistair the past few years, seeing how he changed into the insane cult leader he is now. Given I was his ex, I doubted Alistair would want to talk much, especially considering things had ended in a huge heartbreaking fight. Cal, on the other hand, might be the exact person I needed to fill in that gap and get some proper answers. I just had to figure out how to talk to him alone. Xavier. I found myself pacing as I thought of Xavier. worry spreading throughout my chest. Our last interaction, I couldn't manage to say a single word. I regretted it immensely. More than anything, I wanted to be there for the bat, to tell him things would be alright. Instead, the last look he'd given me was one full of anxiety. Yeah. That would... Yeah. Yeah. And I just watched them separate us. In my desperate bids to be a hero, I was acting far from heroic. I'd let my emotions get in the way and had floundered. Recounting my days with the bat, I'd grown to trust him significantly. I regretted the skepticism and suspicion I'd shown him so much of. All you have to do is, like, scroll up in the chat. If that's... Yeah, it is. Just scroll up in the chat and you'll find the descriptions. I knew I had to be cautious, but he had saved my life that day. If that wasn't the biggest display of trustworthiness, I didn't know what was. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I thought you could, but I was wrong. Sorry. I doubted him for days, even though I was already convinced. The trauma of that bunker was real, and I knew it from the start. The look in his eyes telling me everything. Guilt, worry, and regret all flooded me. I needed to do better. For him, for myself, for everyone that would need my help in the future. I felt myself recoil, the realization that Xavier was once again stuck in an enclosed space without any windows hitting me like a train. He had faced trauma after trauma since he escaped from that bunker. With a sigh, I tried to release the built-up tension I'd been sorting. I'd see him tomorrow at whatever horror Wonderland turned out to be, and I hoped we could talk then. Oh! Oh, this is sprite redesign. I like it. The whole purpose of Xavier and I going to Haven had been to see why they had sent someone for me. It was possible due to the emergency of the bandits stalking them, but that didn't feel right. It had to be something else. The main reason that came to mind was that they had information about Marshall. Automod knows everything. Automod knows all. Automod is always watching. The main reason that came to mind was they had information about Marshall. It seemed like a long shot, but I couldn't help but hold out hope. Over the past year, I'd done everything I could to try and find him. They are. They're so pretty. Every survivor from Haven, or the other camps that I met, I would ask about him. None of them had any answers. No. No. Actually, we do look kind of similar. But, like, I don't know species because this is like domestic dog. That's like wolf. I scoured the whole city looking for him and came up with nothing, which is what kept me motivated. It was a lot stranger for there to be no trace of him than it was to follow a room. Lego dog versus wolf. Oh no. Rumor to a dead end. He had to be alive still. I just need to figure out where. Which once again brought me back to the possible news at Haven and whatever they might have uncovered. I need to get out of here and speak to them. That is, if they were okay. It seemed like overkill for them to shut down the camp over 3 bandits that could easily be scared away or shot at with arrows. Xavier and I had encountered the silence at a relatively far distance from Haven, but maybe it had visited the area earlier. We still didn't know what its range was. A scout could have spotted it nearby and reported back, hence the lockdown. Another fated could have even been in the area and prompted it. We'd done it for less in the past. I sighed, the theories getting me nowhere close enough to finding actual answers. These questions were important but could be saved for another day. I crumpled onto the makeshift bed, letting out another loud sigh of exhaustion. Too much was coming at me too fast, and it was wearing me down significantly. Okay, we can make Automod go bye-bye. Bye-bye, Automod. There were still so many things I didn't know. So many questions I needed resolved that I just didn't have the answers for right now. I laid there for a while, thinking myself in circles. There wasn't anything I could do. No more pieces I could properly fit together. It was like playing one of those horrible glass puzzles that had grown popular just before the end. So many pieces in front of me, and I had no idea how many were still missing. All I could do right now, it seemed, was hope. So I closed my eyes, pulled up the covers, and let myself slowly drift off into the void of sleep. Sleepy times. Oh? I often found parks to be a place of comfort for me. There was something relaxing about walking the trails, seeing the myriad of strangers that had gathered there. Walking down trails, sitting on benches, flying kites, it was a place where you could go to enjoy some good time outdoors despite the busyness of the city. In particular, there was one specific park by the lakefront that had always been my favorite. The water was close enough to the center green that you could dip your toes in it on a hot summer day, watching clouds drifted gently by the wind. A few islands sat off in the distance, a painted ferry making trips back and forth across the water, carrying the passengers who wanted to visit. It was cloudy that day, but still warm from the summer heat. The breeze sweeping in from the lakefront helped to cool me down as I sat on the park bench. I'd wanted to be watching the world around me, spending time enjoying myself like so many others were. Instead, I was staring blurrily at the ground, tears clouding my eyes as I struggled to hold back the tide of emotion that still lingered inside of me. I know, it's amazing. It's good art. Good, amazing art. It had been 3 months since Alistair and I had broken up, and the pain still ate away at my insides every waking moment. I thought we could have spent the rest of our lives together. Oh. Nice. That clearly hadn't been in the cards, though, and I was left reeling from the abruptness for a long while. I'd hoped the park could cheer me up. It didn't work. I was reminded of the memories we'd made there instead. They were small ones, yes, but the memories were everywhere. Anything and everything from us jogging along the lakeside to him buying me a bouquet of flowers one evening. I'd really thought he loved me. The tears I'd been shedding so often began to well up again, threatening to overflow. I remember how desperately I wanted to be rid of those feelings. I'd blinked rapidly, straining to keep the tears from spilling. I don't want to be one of those people that cries in public. I couldn't handle that much attention right now. No matter how hard I tried, though, once the emotions started, there was no way of stopping them. They just built up until the dam inevitably burst. I'd started sobbing, shoving my face into my hands to muffle the noise somewhat, but it didn't help all that much. The sound was reduced from a piercing cry of anguish to a muffled sob of regret. I missed the lion I was in love with, the man who had shown me so much love and affection and kindness. He was a piece of myself I wasn't sure I'd ever get back. I couldn't talk to him then. Too afraid of my emotions would take over again, or I'd do or say something regrettable. If I wanted another chance, I had to wait. As I was sitting there, lost in my thoughts and desperation, I hadn't realized I'd stopped paying attention to my surroundings. I hadn't noticed the people that had stared as they walked by, nor the sun that had slowly begun to peek out from behind the clouds. I especially hadn't noticed the man standing next to me, clearing his throat as he prepared himself to speak. Oh? Excuse me? I'd stopped, slowly bringing my face out of my hands. I thought you might need this. My heart! Ah! 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 Oh, this is actually so amazing. Ah! 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 I can't. I can't. These games are giving me feels and I don't know how to feel about it. It's time to go bye-byes. I turned bashfully to look at the stranger, feeling the heat growing in my cheeks. Illuminated by the warm lighting from the sun stood a tall, large wolf. His fur was a shade of silver, so light it almost looked blue, blowing gently in the breeze. A soft smile filled his muzzle, awkward at my delicate and embarrassing situation, but still presenting a caring nature. He was wearing a navy blue button-up, the topmost button undone. His outheld hand was clutching a white handkerchief that must have been in his breast pocket. What I'd focused on most were his eyes. Oh my god, hiya, and thank you. They were full with concern, to be sure, but the coloring was unlike I'd ever seen. Shades of blue, green, and purple danced across his irises, mesmerizing me in their beauty. I'd never seen a similar coloration once when my parents had taken me on a trip up north as a child. They reminded me of Aurora Borealis. I'm sorry? I'd blinked before my face flushed further in embarrassment. Sorry, it's just... Your eyes reminded me of the Northern Lights. He'd smiled at that, taking my response as an invitation to sit next to me. And no apologies necessary. I thought that might have been what you were talking about. Oh shit. Then why'd you sound confused? Honestly, much appreciated, my guy. Much appreciated. Oh, He'd blushed at my teasing, growing embarrassed. The reaction had drawn a small smile out of me in response. I'd bumped my shoulder into his, drawing his attention again. I was only kidding around. I feel like I joined the Home Somewhere Else Discord server. Just post a link to it. I was only kidding around. That same smile from earlier spread on his face in response to seeing mine. Oof. Glad to see you're feeling good enough to smile. A much better look than crying into your hands. My cheeks reddened once more, my hand moving instinctually to wipe my face again. Here, allow me. He'd raised the handkerchief again, slowly wiping the soft fabric under my eyes to dry the fallen tears before holding it out for me to take. I'm sure you can blow your nose just fine. I'm sure you can blow your own nose just fine. There was no malice or judgment in the statement, no hints of teasing. He was aware of my feelings and knew I'd feel too awkward to have him hold it for me. In just the first minutes of us meeting, this wolf had shown me a kindness and thoughtfulness I hadn't felt in months, completely unprompted. I didn't know why people like him really existed. Gently, I'd taken the cloth and blown, only realizing I didn't know what the etiquette was after having dirtied someone else's handkerchief. I decided on holding it, lowering my hands into my lap and staring at the crumpled thing. If you don't mind me asking, why are you so upset? I'd remained silent, unsure whether to say anything. He'd taken notice that I hadn't outright refused and pushed forward. I know I'm a stranger, but sometimes telling your problems to someone you don't know can lift some of whatever burden you're bearing, even just a bit. If you need it, I'm here to help. It was those final 4 words that got to me, echoing repeatedly in my mind. I'd heard it plenty of times from my friends, and I'd known they all meant it. But right here, right now, hearing them come from someone I'd never met, it chipped a small piece of that sadness that had been consuming me, threatening to pull me down into it. If there were people like him in the world, then maybe things wouldn't suck for whatever was to come next. At least for a little while. So I told him. It all came pouring out of me like a flood. Everything from meeting Alistair, him asking me out, our almost 2 years together, until what had happened 3 months ago and our relationship had hit its end. All of that time, all of that trust built, everything, thrown out the window in a single fucking evening. I'm hurt, I'm scared, I don't know what to do with myself anymore. I wasn't sure when I'd started crying, but my tears had soaked the wolf's handkerchief. The worst part of it all, the thing that my heart keeps coming back to, is that I was so sure he'd loved me. Where did things go wrong? Am I even worth loving? The stranger had been silent the whole time, giving me his full attention as I'd ranted. I wasn't sure whether I'd gone too far in my ramblings. It was a heavy thing to unload on a person, even a friend, let alone someone I'd met just minutes before. I'd waited for him to speak, to tell me he was sorry he'd said anything and that I was too much. I'd waited for him to regret ever speaking to me, to see him get up and leave. If someone so close to me had cast me aside, what reason was there for this man to stay? Not a moment after that thought, he surprised me. I felt the warmth of his body wrap itself around mine, bringing me in for a hug. His body was strong but soft, his fur silky smooth and smelling of citrus. It was comforting in a deep, intimate way, even before he spoke. You'll be okay. Don't place your values so much on others and rely more on yourself. You are enough just as you are. There was a moment's pause before the silent tears turned into sobs. I clutched his shirt as I let everything I'd been building up out. All the sadness, all the pain, all the foolish petty games we'd played. It was messy and uncomfortable, but he didn't care. He just rubbed my back comfortingly, making sure I was okay. It took an uncomfortably long time, but I eventually managed to compose myself. I'd released myself from the hug and took a deep breath, wiping my face once more with a handkerchief. Thank you for that, really. That gentle smile from earlier returned. Don't mention it. Kindness can go a long way, and it's better to spread it than hoard it to yourself. That's a smart idea. I'm gonna go grab a blanket real quick. I'll be right back, because it's literally right here. I'd given him a smile to match his, and he stood up, preparing to take his leave. Oh, before I forget, take one of these. He handed me a small rectangular business card. If you ever need anything, even if it's just a hangout to take your mind off life, text me. I nodded, smiling up at the wolf. Will do. I squinted at the card, reading the small text. Marshall. His grin grew larger across his muzzle, flashing some of his perfect ivory teeth at me. Happy to help. Dorian. His tail flicked quickly behind him at my response. I'll see you around, Dorian. Oh no. See you, Marshall. With that, he turned and walked into the distance. It was impossible for me to know at the time just how significant that moment was, the impact Marshall would have on my life. I hadn't even considered where our relationship would go from there. I'd just known one thing. For the first time in months, I'd felt that, just maybe, everything was going to be alright. My heart! My fucking heart! The clatter of something metallic resounded throughout the room, stirring me out of sleep. A sense of longing had grown in my chest at the memory I'd just dreamt. If only my problems now were as simple as they were then. Yes, I love it. If only Marshall were still by my side. He'd know what to do. I sat up, stretching out my back with a yawn. I wasn't sure how long I'd slept nor what time it was, but I was thankful for the peaceful rest. I remembered the noise then, drawing my gaze to the shutter at the front of the room. There was something on the floor near it. I grabbed the lantern from nearby, surprised it had lasted the night, and walked over to find a small metal tray. Oh joy! Room service! On it was a bowl filled with gruel and a small cup of water, some of which had spilled onto the tray. Guess this is what my breakfast would look like for the near future. I hauled the tray back over to my bed, staring at it intently. I had to weigh my options here, considering there was a significant chance this meal could be poisoned. Even if it was only slightly toxic, the consistency of meals dosed with it would wear me down faster in an attempt to break me. I'd heard horror stories of the news on prison guards who had done similar things, as well as seen it done in countless media as an attempt to break the hero down. Was it better to take the risk of eating it, or to let myself starve? My stomach growled, urging me toward the former option. If that was their plan, starting it today wouldn't make sense due to Wonderland. Alistair had ordered Xavier's finger treated yesterday, leading me to believe they wanted us in top shape for the event. Fuck it. I picked up the plastic cutlery and scooped a spoonful into my mouth. The texture wasn't all too far from oatmeal and tasted slightly sweet as well. There must have been an abundance of sugar if they bothered to waste it on prisoner food. Maybe there was a way I could make use of that info in the future. It wasn't as awful as I was expecting, but this as a meal repeatedly would surely drive me mad. Due to the simplicity, it wasn't long before it was gone. My stomach felt full enough to hopefully provide me with enough energy for what was to come. I set the tray back by the door, leaving everything intact and placed it neatly on it. Trying something off the bat was too expected of a move, and it would serve me better to be patient. I keep thinking Dead Man Wonderland. Like, you know the anime? Like, the prison, if you haven't seen it, it's pretty good. You know, the one thing. I keep thinking it is going to turn out to be like, oh shit, time to, whatever. Time to fucking die. With breakfast out of the way, I was left with nothing much else to do. I could work out, but I was worried that doing so would hinder me during Wonderland. Instead, I picked up a newspaper to pass the time. I wished they'd left a pen or something with me. I had nothing to fill out the crosswords and other puzzles with. Switching back between the newspapers, they were all at least 4 years old. Some even went back decades, covering world events and local stories I remember hearing about growing up. A laugh escaped me at seeing an article talking about Y2K. Same! People worried back then about a computer bug causing the apocalypse. In reality, it had all been a miscommunication error. If only they'd known what was actually to come. After finishing that paper, I moved to put it on the shelf with the others I'd read. As I was bending down to pick up the next one, something at the base of the shelf caught my eye. I pushed it to the left, squatting to get a better view. There was a hole gouged into the metal there, barely big enough for 3 fingers to wiggle their way through. Oh no. One can pray. One can pray. I brought the lantern down for a closer look, trying to make out if there was anything inside there. It was empty, but I saw the cavity curve downwards before going up towards the other side of the wall. As I lean in closer, I hear a faint sound coming from it. Of what, I wasn't sure. I brought my ear down to it, listening. Wasn't sure yet. I brought my ear down to it, listening intently to discern what it was. It sounded like breathing. The breaths were gentle but shuddering, a slight wheezing to them. It almost sounded like they were an old man trapped on the other side. I knew the bandits could be cruel, but surely they wouldn't make an elderly man their prisoner. What use could he serve them? Bait? A loud smash echoed through my cell as someone banged on the metal door, startling me to my feet. I stood there watching as the shutter slowly raised up from the floor. Light started to fill the chamber as 2 of my captors stood there, one holding a lantern while the other held a length of rope. I stared at them, unknowing, until one let out a sigh. Come on, hands out for us. There's no need to make this difficult. I stepped forward, reluctantly raising my arms. I wanted to tell them to fuck off, to fight them and cause a scene, but knowing it would get me nowhere. I'd be complicit for now. My keyboard has red lights. My hands were bound in a similar fashion to the previous days, except with the comfort of them being in front of me this time. Alright, bud, let's get your ass to Wonderland. The guard with the lantern closed the shutter behind me as we stepped out into the hall. Made a mental note for later that they'd kept me in Unit 229. The shutter next to me, Unit 228, was closed as well, with a large padlock through the handle. Someone was definitely inside. The halls we walked were all glaringly plain, rows upon rows of storage units that were indistinguishable in every way except for their numbers. Lining them were lanterns hanging from the nails embedded in the concrete, making up the difference in light due to the lack of windows. I will literally, like... If they make that, we will make sure that Xavier can live longer. Time to swing from the chandelier. We reached a staircase at the end of the hall and made our way down to the basement level. The place hasn't changed in style, yet just knowing it was underground made it feel creepier. I doubted this place had any sort of large underground space big enough to host whatever event was planned. It was just a storage facility after all. Upon opening the door, I was met with a long and narrow hallway. A guard waited on the opposite side and nodded as we passed. The other end of the tunnel was a distance away, stopping at a turn to the right. Were we in some kind of secret passage? If so, then where to? That is a good question. I could feel my mind starting to spin with questions again, threatening to veer out of control. There was so much I didn't know that it was overwhelming. I took a deep breath then, exhaling all the anxieties and scattered thoughts. There'd be a time and a place for that, but it wasn't now. My priority for now was keeping myself alive and finding Xavier. Now wasn't the time to panic over things I couldn't change. Now's the time to focus on survival. Please don't. Please don't. I'm begging you. After several minutes of silence, broken only by the soft padding of our feet on the concrete, we finally reached the end of the turning passage. I'm sorry, but if Marshall is a faded, I am going to go say bye-bye and then go to sleep in the forever box. I am serious. If Marshall turns out to be a faded and we have to kill him or we have to, like, fight Xavier, I will literally go to sleep in the forever box. There were a set of stairs leading up to another guard and rusted metal door. Oh? I blinked my eyes at the light upon exiting. We looked to be in a shipping warehouse. Yeah. Shipping crates covered the place, their brightened hues bringing a fresh color palette to the bleak surroundings. Broken machinery scattered the floor, mixed in with other bits of debris. Light streamed through holes in the ceiling. The owner of this building must have owned the storage unit as well. Why else would there be a tunnel directly connecting the two? Oh no, we're dealing with some Mad Max bullshit. Oh no. I haven't actually seen Mad Max, I only, no references of it. Rather than going in further, we stuck along the wall and were brought to a small locker room. Saleo PTSD. It was clear this was where the employees had once changed into their uniforms and stored their belongings while at work. Now it's full of bandits guarding the edges and all possible exits. The rest of the people, who I assumed were other prisoners, mingled around the room, watching each other with cautious glances. Oh, okay. A few had sheathed their knives at their waist, making their role obvious, though for some it was hard to tell if they might be a bandit or prisoner. These were all just people, after all, dirty, scarred, and broken by events of the past. My escorts untied my hands, giving me a wave as they walked through the exit. Bum, bum, bum. Have fun today, and make sure to put on a good show for us. He laughed to himself before he and his partner left the room, leaving me with nearly 24 other prisoners in the large room. Another person went to follow them out, but was stopped by one of the guards at the door. Excuse me, if I could just get through here? No way, buddy. You've got Wonderland to attend. Xavier! They flashed a smile, not a hint of that earlier confidence shed. Exactly! I need to get good seats before they run out. The bandit smiled back. All right then, show me your scar. Their smile twitched. Excuse me? If you're truly unignited, then Alistair would have left his mark on you to prove you belong here. As if practiced, he pulled his shirt just below his collarbone to reveal a small burn wound visible through his fur. Their face had whitened, that confidence now completely gone. That's what I thought. The prisoner walked away, embarrassed and nervous. That confirmed my concerns from earlier that they all wore the burn and that it was intentional. This was their mask and the best way to identify them. Mark. This is their mark. After that exchange, I took the next moment to analyze everyone in the room. There were a few interesting parties milling about on both sides, and I wondered if I could make any allies to help us escape. A familiar shape drew my attention. I finally locked eyes with Xavier, the bad-looking, disheveled, and worn out from just one night alone in his cell. Xavier! His eyes lit up a bit as we made our way towards each other and threw ourselves into a tight hug. I hadn't even realized how much I missed the kid until he was right there. I stroked his head with one hand, smoothing it out as best as I could. I felt some wet droplets hit the back of my neck. You okay, Xavier? I'm fine. Just need a moment. He raised a hand to wipe his face before drawing himself back out of the hug. I noticed his finger had been wrapped with gauze and set. Oh, okay. How's the finger holding up? It hurts to move it, but the nurse they have here was nice. Nice enough to be an ally? He brought his hand to his chin as he considered the idea. Possibly. I wouldn't be willing to bet it all on one interaction, though. Well, we can put her in the maybe category, then. You make it sound as though you already have the beginnings of a plan in place. Who's to say I don't? The fact that your bedhead seems about as tamed as mine. Hey, I'll have you know it's a stylistic choice. It makes me seem more approachable. Or like you're one of those people who has a shirt that says, "Don't talk to me until I've had my coffee." I put a hand on my chest in mock offense. I would never. I don't believe you. It's true. Then was it on a mug? I remained silent, causing him to smile. It was on a mug. There was no possible rebuttal I could make now, sighing in defeat. Point Xavier. He celebrated with a fist pump. Even though he'd won that exchange, I couldn't help but smile at getting to talk with the bat again. He was a good person to banter with or take your mind off things. Frankly, that was the one thing I wanted to do the most right now. Humor is my favorite coping mechanism when dealing with stress. So then, what is your big plan? I wish I had one, kid. There's just too many variables at the moment to sort it out properly. He nodded, thinking to himself. I take it you haven't learned anything about Wonderland yet? I shook my head. About as much as you have, I guess. Then maybe I could help. Oh? He turned in unison at the sudden voice, coming face to face with a spotted hyena I'd never seen before. Their fur cascaded over their head like a mohawk, clearly combed thoroughly. Oh, who's that? Their eyes were deep blue, brought up by the heavy bags that rested under them. Clearly they didn't get much sleep. Okay. A silver nose ring sat at the end of their muzzle, surprising me. I hadn't seen any of the other prisoners allowed anything like this. They wore a white tank top and dark maroon khakis, both in surprisingly good condition. The hyena definitely took a lot of pride in their looks. That was, except for the dirtied bandages they kept wrapped around their arms. It was a curious contrast to the cleanliness. Name's Shen. Always wonderful to meet two handsome men like yourselves. They both extended their hand. They extended both hands to us with a smirk, waiting expectantly for us to take them. The exchange was so far off-putting, their tone of voice low and tired yet carrying an air of confidence and intrigue. They almost sounded unamused by the situation. I took their left one, resulting in a firm and lengthy shake. Oh, well now, don't be shy. I've yet to hear the lovely couple's names. I blinked. Couple? Are you not? Thought if two studs like you knew each other, there was no chance they'd be single and ready to mingle. There's only so much mingling you can do in an apocalypse, too. Don't let the opportunity pass you by. I was dumbfounded at the hyena, my mind drawing a blank at how I was supposed to respond. Instead, I focused on the first thing they said. You said you could help? They smirked. Ah, so you were listening. I thought I'd lost you for a moment there. Of course I can help, though it will come at a price. Of course it will. Hey now, I never said I wasn't open to negotiations. That is, if you tell me your names. I rolled my eyes at them. I could already tell they were going to be a handful to deal with, but I needed information. I'm Dorian. He's Xavier. With the final shake, they let go of our hands. Took you long enough. Dorian and Xavier, huh? They really roll off the tongue, and that's only my second favorite muscle to use. Shen winked before clapping their hands together. So, negotiations. How does $1,000,000 sound? Again, I was speechless. They were definitely after something else, but the absurdity caught me off guard. I'm sorry, what? You're forgiven. There was silence between all three of us before they spoke again. Too high? Clearly! Besides, what use would you even have for money? Isn't it all worthless now? An excellent point. God, why hadn't I thought of that? The sarcasm on their voice was so thick I could practically feel it in the air. What is it that you actually want, Shen? Your souls. All emotion and expression left them at that before the smile returned. Kidding! Man, you should have seen the look on your faces. Xavier and I exchanged a glance, both of us wearing unamused expressions. I'm just going to put the blanket back on. Safety blanket. Shen sighed, giving up. The way they acted now seemed to be their true self, the display just before being just that, a display. Their bodies seemed to sag a bit more with exhaustion, their posture relaxing as their voices carried an almost disinterested tone. Damn, tough crowd. Would it kill you both to lighten up a bit? Look, I won't ask for much. Just make a deal with me that if you both survive Wonderland, we can have a three-way. I waited for them to show it was a facade and laugh again, but it never came. They were serious. Count me out. I'm already in a committed relationship. I thought you said you two weren't dating. We're not. My boyfriend isn't here with us. They sighed. Alright, Loverboy's out then. How about you, Twink? Xavier didn't respond to them. I looked over, seeing he'd become flustered at the overall exchange. What are you acting so shy for? It's just sex and I doubt you're a virgin. No response from the bat. Wait, seriously? No fucking way. The smirk stretched across their face again, their interest reaching an all-time high. They slung an arm around his shoulder. I can give you the first time of your life, handsome. Don't worry, I can be gentle with nervous bottoms like you. It wouldn't be my first time. Reaching the limit of what he could take, Xavier flung his arms up, accidentally smacking Shen in the process. I'm not going to fuck you. Shen winced, rubbing the spot where they were hit. Okay, I get it. No need for violence right now. Save that for the arena. Finally, some kind of information. What do you mean? Realizing they weren't going to get in our pants and that their whole ordeal might have gone too far, they sighed. Fine. I'll tell you in exchange for a favor later. We glared at them, causing them to raise their hands innocently. And I promise it won't be for sex. Deal? I smiled, preferring this outcome to the previous offers. Deal. Huh, nice. They rubbed the back of their neck, stretching and letting out a yawn. The brief exchange had already drained some of what little energy they had. Wonderland is essentially a survival of the fittest type event. Our self-proclaimed saviors sent us out into the arena. They pointed to the exit near the windows, and matches against Fated in a fight to the death. Bro, that's fucked. I felt the color draining from my face. They captured a Fated? But how? As soon as I had asked myself, the answer popped into my head. The shipping containers. Bingo. They store them in there until they have enough participants for the next event. They scoffed at their own words. Participants, as if we have a fucking choice. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how the hell we were going to get out of this one alive. There was no way they'd leave us unarmed for it, otherwise it would get boring for them after a while. We had to stand a chance for them to even consider it entertainment. I was about to try and get more info out of them when a voice interjected itself. Shen! They sounded annoyed, our hyena ally clearly having pissed someone else off. Shit, quick, hide me. Don't let Treat find me. Who? Treat. It's his name. He doesn't like when you question it. They ducked behind us, using us as a cover in an attempt to avoid the approaching person. Hello. Striding toward us was a slightly scruffy Wolverine. It surely had been a while since he had a chance to trim his fur. His eyes were a maroon color, a couple shades lighter than Shen's pants. He wore a varsity jacket over a gray shirt, showcasing his larger build and muscled arms. He had clearly been some kind of athlete, judging by his appearance. I wondered if maybe he'd been a student at the university before everything happened. Oh, okay. He was shorter than the rest of us, around 5'9", but his voice was the deepest as he spoke. Oh, I'm shorter than the shortest person in the game. I can see you crouched behind them, Shen. No, you can't. As if reading each other's thoughts, Xavier and I stepped to the side in sync. Traitors! The stranger stepped forward, looking down at the hyena. Come on, get up now. They stood up, putting a fake whine in their voice and pouting, like a child about to throw a tantrum. But, Dad, you said I could go and play with the other kids. The Wolverines sighed, rubbing their forehead in annoyance. Why do I still put up with you? Because you have no other friends. Treat paused as if considering it. You're right. He brought his gaze to me, shifting his attention off of Shen. Nice to meet you. Interested in being my new friend? I looked at Shen briefly before meeting Treat's eyes again. Absolutely. He smiled while the hyena stared in shock. You can't replace me that easily. Watch me. He turned to Xavier next, who was already smiling in anticipation. You don't even have to ask. Would you look at that? 2 for the price of 1. The three of us laughed while Shen grumbled unamused. Come on, dudes. Come on, dude. You know I'm just kidding around. He brought an arm around their shoulder, shaking them a bit. This seemed to bring them back around to their energy from before. Sorry about any trouble they might have caused. They're an asshole, but I promise they're the lovable kind. Shen shrugged. When it suits me. I rolled my eyes. They were actually pretty helpful. Aside from trying to fuck us immediately. Without looking, Treat smacked Shen upside the head. Ow! What was that for? Why do you always try to fuck people as soon as you meet them? Another shrug. It's a force of habit. Don't slut shame me. Whores have feelings too. I'm not. I'm just you-shaming you. So you admit it. Treat sighed, but Shen interrupted before they could speak again. My sluttiness worked on you, didn't it? You forget I've yet to fuck you. Emphasis on the yet. Shen winked, prompting an eye roll from the Wolverine. Anyway, you said they were helpful for once? Hey! We ignored them. Damn it. We ignored them. They told us a bit about what Wonderland actually is. We really have to fight the Faded. Do we really have to fight Faded? Unfortunately so. It's a feat in itself they managed to capture any, but they somehow do. If it was true, it really would be something impressive. And how do you know that? Shen smirked as if waiting for this moment. Because, Loverboy, you're looking at two of its survivors. Seriously? Seriously, this will be my second event. And my third. I'm the reigning champion. The whole crowd loves me. That's probably because you've slept with most of them. And that's called strategy, my dear friend. Judging by their interactions, there was no doubt the two knew each other. It would have made sense if they bonded over the trauma of being captured by the bandits. They were close and for whatever reason had deemed us trustworthy enough to be allies. I already had enough regret with how I treated Xavier, so maybe I could make up for that here. I could trust the duo, right? Before I could ask more, I was once again interrupted by the sound of a loud voice. Alright everyone, cut the chit-chat and pay attention. The show's about to begin. The room quieted and Treat leaned in, whispering to us, Good luck, you two. I hope to see you both at the end of the day. Shen turned to look at Xavier. I called dibs on that crop top if you do die. They earned another smack from the Wolverine as the two walked away. No one. They're certainly interesting. You can say that again. I opened my mouth and was met with a glare from the bat until I shut it again. Do you think we can trust them? I don't know, but they put some in us. We should at least try. Xavier nodded and the two of us walked closer to the windows to get a better view of our arena. Oh? I shielded my eyes from the bright morning light as we peered out, taking in what would soon be the place where we fought for our lives. Shipping containers had been arranged in a square against the warehouse, massive in size and stacked 2 or 3 high. The floor was covered in sand, most likely to absorb any blood spilt in the heat of battle. Atop the adjacent walls sat the bandits, my eyes widening at the sheer number of them. There had to be a few hundred here, a number much larger than where I was greeted. Where had they been keeping them all? Thinking about it, I wasn't sure that number of people could fit in the storage facility we were being held in. Was there a secondary base? The sheriff guy's name in the smoke room is William. Or were some of these people guests? Either the amount who showed up was intentional or someone had broken the first 2 rules of this club. I shivered at the thought that some of these people went out of their way to watch their fellow people fight to the death. I was starting to feel like a gladiator, just without the glory, or adequate weapons. I could only see so much from where we were, but I heard more. The chatter of the masses in the stands, the nervous murmurs from the other prisoners, and the loud bangs from a few of the shipping containers. The fact that this was outside and this loud was an incredible risk. Who knows how many Faded could be alerted by this show? Having this many Faded in a small place was dangerous enough, But if they attracted more, it'd be a bloodbath. The longer I stood watching this scene, the more unsettled I felt. I was unwillingly dragged into the shit show and now was meant to serve them as entertainment. The noise began to die down suddenly, drawing my attention away from my thoughts to see what had caused this. Oh, for fuck's sake, Alistair. Standing atop the opposite wall, Cal positioned off to the side, was my ex. While he'd shown some of his stage persona to us yesterday, this felt over the top. Now, to accentuate his role as the greatest showman still alive, he donned a top hat and a cane. It felt completely over the top, but the worst part was that he looked good with them. The crowd had fallen silent entirely as he stood there, smugly looking out over his psychopaths. He was reveling in the attention. Psychophants. Wow! Once he decided he'd had enough, he spread his arms wide and spoke. His voice boomed across the arena, echoing back across the space like speakers had been set up. Welcome, everyone, to the show! With those words alone, violent cheering erupted from the crowd, drowning out the banging from inside the storage containers. The people were excited and eagerly awaiting this moment. We here with the Ignited are happy to bring you all another round of our glorious Wonderland. We have spent the past few months gathering both contestants and Fated in order to provide you all with the best experience possible. Today will be our biggest show yet, so let's give everyone who helped make this possible a hand. The sound of their collective claps echoed across the space, deafeningly loud. He was almost like a salesman at that moment, trying to push a product on a bunch of naive customers. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Shen clapping along before Treat flicked the back of their head. This prompted a confused stance from the hyena, making the Wolverine roll his eyes and accidentally making eye contact with me. I smiled and shook my head before facing the arena once more as the applause died down. That yin really was something. I couldn't get a read on them, and that concerned me, but at least Treat seemed to be able to keep them in line mostly. Well, beggars can't be choosers. They were our best choice of allies at the moment, so I might as well trust them. Those of you who have attended our event before know the drill, but I see a number of fresh faces among the crowd. Allow me to explain. Just down there, sequestered away into that warehouse, wait our lovely contestants. 21 individuals in the prime of their life, ready to face down a variety of horrors. One by one, we will select a contestant to enter our lovely arena and face off against a randomly selected Fated. However, it would be horribly cruel to leave them unarmed. The Ignited aren't monsters after all. Never have I wanted to smack the smirk off someone's face harder than I did now. The more I listened to him, the more the rage built up in me. Use it, Dorian. Use it, Dorian. You can't get him yet, but you can keep yourself and Xavier alive. Instead, we were lucky enough to have blessed with a collection of antique weapons that have been preserved in premium condition. Gentlemen, if you'll kindly bring out the rack. He waved his hand towards the side of the arena. There was a clatter of metal as the door to the arena opened, and a large rectangular mass was slid out under a sheet. Once in view of everyone, the two guards handling it whipped it off to reveal dozens of weapons beneath. Swords, knives, axes, hammers, maces, all sorts of medieval weaponry. My best guess was they'd found in one of the storage units here, likely belonging to a collector of the sort. Our contestants will receive their weapon of choice, and that is where the fun really begins. The Fated is unleashed, and one-on-one they battle until only one remains standing. Now you might be thinking, what happens if a Fated wins? Worry not, my friends, the answer is quite simple. Our next contestant will be sent out valiantly to continue the fight their fallen ally started, until either our participants succeeded or gets too boring to see it win and we intervene. However, should they manage to kill all our Fated before the end, a special prize will await them all. Does everyone understand? Cheers sounded as the impatient crowd yearned for their entertainment. Their energetic fervor was almost intoxicating. Excellent! Then without further ado, tension rose in the air as all the attention was drawn to Alistair. His charisma put into overdrive and becoming almost magnetic. Friends and families of all species, from all manner of homes and places, for those inside and outside the gender binary, on and off the queer spectrum, today we provide you the show of a lifetime. Man against monster, predator versus prey. Who shall prevail before the light draws to a close? I am your lovely host, Alice, and I welcome you all to my Wonderland. Upon finishing the sentence, flames appeared to shoot out of his hands, drawing the loudest roar yet from the surrounding crowd. I'd always known he had a flair for the dramatic, but to use it to this degree felt like insanity, going so far as to create his own stage effects. As much as I hated this, what I hated more was the part of me that was impressed. To put in this much effort into any kind of production, it was a difficult feat. Especially in such a short time frame in our current world. Yet, I still had absolutely no clue as to his motivations. Was it a desire for power? Attention? Could have been something else entirely, deeper than I knew. The idea alone scared me. That manic look in his eyes from yesterday still haunted me. There was something wrong with Alistair, and I feared it would burn us all up before we managed to break free from his precious ignited. I was hoping to take a moment further to dwell on the situation when Alistair's voice rang out once more. To start off today's events, we have a very special contestant in our midst today. Someone I knew so long ago. Someone who believes he's all that. He spit the words out with the venom, his eyes searching a crowd of prisoners gathered at the windows for me. I was lucky to have stumbled upon him when I did, having only shown his face here yesterday, but when I looked into those fierce eyes of his, I saw the spirit of a fighter. He's become a changed man since I knew him, it seems, yet I still have my own doubts. Instead, we will give him the chance to prove himself today. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to my soon-to-be dearly departed former love, Dorian. I could feel the corner of my eye twitching, my anger beginning to bubble once more. This fucker had the audacity to make me go first. I narrowed my eyes at the lion through the windows as he waited for me to exit. He wanted to play with fire so badly, huh? As I turned towards the door, I made eye contact with Xavier. The same scared look from last night was plastered on his furry face, although to a somewhat softer degree. I gave him as large a smile as I could muster to comfort him, patting him on the shoulder as I passed. Don't worry, Xavier. I've got this. I thought I heard him say something in response, but it was swallowed by the murmurs of the crowd. As the guards grabbed me and forced me to move faster, they pushed me out of the door, causing me to stumble in the sand. I quickly caught my footing and made my way to the board. Quiet now, everyone. It's time to see which weapon our intrepid hero shall choose. Ignoring the lion, I scanned the rack for any spears and drew up short. The weapons were all short to medium ranged, allowing the user little distance between them and the enemy. Rounding to the other side, I saw my next best option. Carefully, I withdrew the rapier from its place and rested its balance in my hand. It was much finer than the fencing foils I'd used in my youth, the grip comfortable on my palm and finely balanced. There was a slight swish as I slashed it through the air. Our contestant has chosen the rapier. Everyone give him a round of applause for his sportsmanship. The rack was then glided back into the start room, ready in case someone else had to take a turn at what I would face out here. I ignored the jeers and shouts of the crowd and instead stared straight at Alistair, his eyes boring into mine. He was enjoying this even more than yesterday. Before we draw your fate, is there anything you'd like to say to the crowd? They might just well be your final words. I thought for a moment, trying to decide what to say. He was right in that this could be my end, but I was too stubborn to give him that satisfaction. Deciding to opt out of words, I instead raised my sword towards Alistair. I pointed it straight at him as if calling his bluff. The message was clear. He didn't break me before, and he wouldn't break me this time. Cocky. Better hope you can live up to that attitude. Cal stepped forward, then holding a bowl out to Alistair filled with several paper clips. Without further ado, let's pick your opponent. Alistair stuck his hand in, swirling the papers before drawing out a single piece and unfolding it. Your future lies behind. The lion paused for dramatic effect, the crowd holding their breath as they waited for the results. My own heart pounded in my chest. Despite my bold response to Alistair, I was terrified. The fated weren't something one messed around with, and despite me trying to keep a calm facade, there was a serious chance I was about to die. Door number 3! A large metal grinding sounded in space. The doors to one of the shipping crates opened. I had noticed it before, but the one atop it was ajar with ropes coming out of it. The people inside were pulling them, unlocking the door and forcing it open just enough for light to peek into the space. The noise of the area had ground to a halt at that, my breathing the only thing stopping my anxiety from completely taking over. Any second now. The bang of the door slamming open drew startled cries from the crowd as at long last my opponent slowly emerged. The Fated was large, roughly the size of the vampire I'd encountered a mere week ago. However, this one carried a lot more flesh on it. I'm in danger. We are in danger. It was an amalgamation of parts fused together to make what stood before me. Facing me was its first skull, sockets hollow with an eye loosely hanging from one end. Fur trailed down its neck, leading to the bulging body. That's awful. Its skin was smooth but lumpy, as if it were malleable to the touch. It had the same gray tones as that of clay as well. It looks amazing. It looks amazing. Another skull carrying antlers emerged from its back, as if the body had absorbed whoever it once belonged to. Though it only had one arm, 2 additional appendages that stuck out like that of an insect made up for it. As it ambled out into the arena slowly at first, it began its dash towards me, ready to catch its first prey in who knows how long. The creature wasn't too fast, not like the others I've encountered, likely due to its mass. I was able to easily dodge out of the way of its first swing. The Fated's arm smashed into the sand, throwing up a spray of dust. It spun with me, tracking my movement with its eyes. It slammed its paw down, and I jumped at the last moment. I swung my sword at the limb and sliced clean through it. The sensation caught me off guard, confusing me for a moment. A rapier was a heavy weapon, yes, but it was still thin and flexible. A tool meant for piercing and slashing without the girth or momentum to sever bone. Upon looking at my rapier, there was a lack of the distinct black blood that most Fated carried. There was a shine of some kind of fluid, though what kind I had no clue. The growl from the Fated drew my attention back to it, showing the arm still attached. It didn't make sense. I knew I'd cut it. Then from beneath it, I saw the severed arm, only it wasn't lying motionless on the ground. It was scurrying towards me, claws scratching at the sand in a desperate attempt to gain traction. I backed up, trying to give myself some time to think. The Fated seemed to know what I wanted, though, and closed in on me. It moved with more vigor than before, likely enraged at me, literally slicing its arm off. Precisely, I sliced again, cutting off more of its body as I circled around it. Sure enough, the fallen pieces brought themselves back to life and hurried after me. The lumps rolled, crawled, and threw themselves across the ground trying to get to me. I watched the main body carefully as it regenerated, desperately searching for any discernible weakness. The closest I could get was that it took from its existing mass to build the missing portion. The Fated grew smaller over time. In return, the smaller size made it more agile. It didn't toss clouds of sand up as it moved anymore, but it was getting harder to dodge its attacks. I didn't want to slice any more of it off, but I didn't have much of a choice. Its flesh was too soft and the rapier was in incredible condition. A sharp pain pierced my lower thigh. A blob had caught up to me without me noticing and had flung itself on my leg, latching onto the flesh through my pants. I batted away with my blade, piercing through it as it fell to the ground. The sheer amount of blobs chasing after me was getting harder and harder to keep track of. I was struggling to avoid them all, not to mention the main body lunging after me. 2 blobs slammed into me from different angles, one against my back and one on my non-dominant hand. They bit into the flesh as I spun to remove them, my panic rising. There was a way to defeat this, but how? I stared at the main body, smaller and more agile now. There had to be a hint of how to kill this thing from its origin. I kept its distance from me now, allowing the scattered body parts to have their way with me instead. If I reduced its size further, I might have a shot. It was incredibly risky, but I had no other ideas. I was growing desperate. Oh, cool. Yeah, you should have taught Xavier. Carefully weaving my way around the pieces, I went for it with all I had. I swung my rapier as it spun to the side, shrugging off most of my blow. I barely managed to make contact, its agility letting it keep far away from me. I jumped back as it took a swipe at me, its claws slashing across my forehead. Blood began to trickle into my right eye and forced it shut. I panted, desperate to find a way to win. My eyes scanned the field and I finally saw it. Past all the parts that surrounded me and its body, hidden all the way back in the shadows of the storage container it had been housed in, was another lump of flesh. This one was darker than the others and was nearly indistinguishable from the rest aside for one key detail. It was the only one pulsating, an iridescent sheen like the fluid that spewed from its nauseous veins covering the surface. This was my last chance, my final gambit at surviving this fight to the death. I stared at the faded, circling the field of flesh until I had separated it and its origin. I lunged forward towards it, then fainted and spun in the other direction. Sand sprayed everywhere as I pushed towards the container. It was harder in the sand of the arena, but I was making good progress. A roar of fury sounded from behind me. The container shook as it caught on, racing to reach me before I closed in on its core. It was a race to the finish, and I only had a few seconds head start. I could hear the footsteps gaining on me as we drew closer to our mutual goal, trying to beat the other to the dark enclosure. The faded was practically breathing down my neck as I reached the structure. With one final push, I flung myself forward, rapier extended like a radiant beam of light. A wet squelch marked the sound of my hit. I watched as black blood burbled out of the hole I'd made, seconds before the mass of the body behind me collided with my own and sent me sprawling. There was a dull thud of flesh against metal as I hit the wall of the container, blinding pain shooting through my back as I gasped. Stars danced in my vision as I looked from my place on the ground back towards the entrance. The pulsing lump of flesh was now deflated and unmoving. The main body and other bits were as well. I pulled myself to my feet using the wall for support. My body ached as I made my way to the center of the arena. I was lucky I hadn't been hit anywhere vital, but I'd need some recovery time. I turned towards the stands, staring back at Alistair and pointing my rapier towards him once more. It's hard to tell from this distance, but rather than the shock I'd been hoping for, I was met with one of smug certainty, like he'd expected this outcome. It seems we have our first winner of the day! If the crowd had been cheering during the fight, I'd been too focused to tell, but I could hear nothing but their praise now. I'd played Alistair's little game and fallen right into his hands, serving as a circus freak for the world to see. A group of bandits emerged from the door and began picking up the pieces of the scattered, throwing them into the door it originally emerged from. I could only stand and wait for Alistair to speak next. The door back to the waiting room sealed once more. Quite a first performance, if I do say so myself. I can tell Dorian has quickly become a candidate for the favorite of today's events. I glared up at him. Even now, he still shows that fighting spirit. I'd say to give this man a hand, but he's already cut off enough for the day. Somehow the laughter from the audience was even worse than their cheers. Instead of facing my captors, I strode back to the door I'd come from as they brought the weapon rack back out. It's going to be tough for our next candidate to beat the show, but he can certainly try. This contender joined our previous one on their journey here, a duo of two friends who might just be more than they say they are. I continued forward, ignoring his obvious jab. He's tall, lean, and ready to leave our arena with a red sheen. Up next we have Xavier. I felt my blood begin to boil at his words. Wishing I could knock some sense into him, I hated that Xavier would have to go next, but I was in no condition to volunteer for his place. As I passed the rack, I placed my rapier on it while looking it over again. The mental imagery of Xavier's face when I left pressing itself to the forefront of my mind. It clicked then, why he'd worn that fearful look. As he emerged from the room, that look was still present on his face. We'd been given our choice of weapons from this rack, something to help us in close combat during our fights. In other words, there were no bows. Xavier was weaponless. Hey, yo. Alright, time to save. Let's just, go through this. To be continued. I'm also kind of curious about that. I'd have to guess it's the otter. Yeah. This has officially been the longest stream we've ever done. Over 2 hours. This is going to be a pain in the ass to upload tomorrow. To upload to YouTube tomorrow. Well, where I'm at right now, it's like 14 p.m. a.m. Yeah. It was so good. So good. I loved it. I loved it. Ah. Ah. We all certainly did an amazing job. You all did an amazing job, and I can't wait to see what comes next. But until then, stay safe, have a good night, and I will see you all tomorrow.